Welcome back to the channel, this is Scott. As you probably picked up by the intro, this is going to be a themed keyboard build. So what theme? Spider-Man, of course. Your friendly neighborhood What? It's not Spider-Man? Then what the hell am I wearing? Hi guys, this is Scott. How am I supposed to talk with this thing? It's on. Hi guys, welcome back to Keyboard, this is Scott. And today, we are building a themed keyboard featuring the ACR75 by Akko. We're actually building it to the theme of Nezuko from Demon Slayer, as you could probably see by this ridiculous outfit. So a lot of you guys asked me to take a look at the ACR75, and I'm really glad I did, because this keyboard is actually pretty good out of the box, and with a little bit of modification, it becomes great. So what did I do to the keyboard other than wear this ridiculous outfit? Well, let's get started.
So first things first, the box the ACR75 comes in is a deluge of colors. And you're also probably wondering, I thought this was the ACR75. Why does the box and everything else say Acrylic 81? Well, the keyboard is a 75% keyboard but also has 81 keys, so I have seen this keyboard go as both the ACR75 and the ACR81, so I know, it's kind of odd. Inside the box, you get the keyboard barebones kit and also a coiled USB-C cable. It's not a sleeved one, but you know, for $89 as a kit, it really doesn't have to be. The ACR75 comes in many different colors like white, pink, blue, and the version I got, which is black. For today's themed build, I wanted to start with a nice black foundation to add some pink accents into it to represent Nezuko. The ACR75 is a stacked acrylic gasket mount keyboard. Given that construction, this should be pretty simple in terms of how the case is put together. Essentially, you have layers of acrylic that is held together by a screw to pretty much make the case, and in one of the layers, you're going to have a cutout to host a gasketed plate in between. One thing I noticed right away about the ACR75 was the overall case height. It is actually very low. This was probably the first keyboard I have seen in a while that the front case was actually shorter than my wrist rests by far. We're going to talk about that later. The bottom of the case is pretty simple, with the back having these giant bumps to help provide a slope to the keyboard. The ACR75 comes with a nice FR4 plate and features north-facing hot swap PCB with per key RGB. Finally, this being a kit and all, it also comes with these purple plate mounted stabilizers that's also included. So to start out, why don't we see how this board is like in stock form? I wanted to simulate somebody just building this thing up and just using it straight up. So I put some stock Gateron Pro Reds in, since these are pretty common, and then I threw on some shine through OEM PBT keycaps from Drop. Since this keyboard is a north-facing RGB, I felt like, just seemed like the right thing to do. So let's take it for a spin, shall we? So what I immediately noticed was the board's tendency to be pretty thocky, usually the case with acrylic boards. Plus, this being a north-facing with shine-through keycaps, it has some spectacular RGB light shows, if that is important to you. A negative that I did find was this. This is a super stiff board for a gasket-mounted structure. The PTSD from the Gmk Pro saga was starting to creep up again. I really need to figure something out to fix this. Now let's take this baby apart and fix some issues, mod it to make it better, and turn it into the Nezuko. When you undo the screws, you can start to see how this all comes apart. Then you can start to lift up the layers one by one, exposing the plate, the foam, the PCB, and everything else that's actually inside this ACR75. It's a very simple design overall. As soon as I took the board apart, I found the stiffness issue. Essentially, the PCB is touching the lower case, and yup, you have absolutely no room for the gaskets to flex into. The Gmk Pro issue. Even though this is a gasket mounted keyboard, you can see right here that the gasket don't really do much because there's nowhere for it to push into. Remember what I said about this being a really low case? I feel that Akko should have just added one more acrylic layer to just give it more room. So, first mod coming up. Since I wanted to increase the room inside, I'm going to increase the thickness of one of the acrylic layers, and for that, I used this. I cut out sheets of 1mm silicone adhesive and placed it on both sides of the lower acrylic frame. Doing this on both sides gives me 2mm of additional room inside, which is plenty for a nice flex. You can also do this by just using two 1mm washers, but I'm kind of crazy and I also wanted to preserve the look of this board as much as possible. I like to just make things really hard for myself. I also thought about upgrading the gaskets, but you know what, I felt these are just pretty fine. So, we'll be testing the efficacy of this change that I did coming up shortly. So let's hope that it flexes. Before that, let's take a look at the PCB, because this is also very interesting. Yes, it has hot swap sockets, but it's TTC. It also works the same as Coil, so no issues here. However, what is really interesting is that the ACR75 has holes ready to take, wait for it, screw-in stabs. That is great, right? Well, yes and no. The holes for the spacebar is actually set for 7U, while the plate only supports 6.25U, so you can technically use screw-ins for all the other stabs except the spacebar. Bummer. Oh, one more thing. The PCB has side-firing LEDs to be able to light up the acrylic case as well, if that matters to you. Before I started putting everything back together, I did the tape mount on the PCB with 2 layers of masking tape. This board has a very Thocky undertone, so I really wanted to emphasize that as much as possible. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it. But before we do the final assembly, remember I made the case 2mm thicker? The screws are not really long enough now to close the case, so I had to use a drill bit to bore out some additional space in the lower acrylic plate so that it has room now for the screw to really seat in properly. Acrylic is a fairly weak material, so don't do this with an actual drill. You're gonna literally just crack the whole entire thing. You can just spin it with your fingers and bore it out, about 0.5 millimeter with it's not that hard, so just use your fingers. Then I finished putting everything together and threw on these switches. The Demon Princess by Akko and TTC. See, this is a NEZUKO themed keyboard, right? But here is an interesting thing about these switches. They have this crazy lens on the housing to really emphasize RGB lighting. But what that does is that this switch doesn't really work with cherry profile in the south-facing orientation. You heard me right, in south-facing. Like literally, this switch is a big middle finger to all of us that said anything negative about north-facing PCBs. It works perfectly fine in north-facing. Like, check these out with the Gmk Pulse Keycaps. Now for the keycaps. Keeping up with the theme, I decided to use the PBT Evening Sakura Keycaps by Akko in cherry profile. Now you're probably wondering, you went through all that trouble to increase the case thickness for that flex, so let me see some flex. Check it out. That extra 2mm that I gave really allows the ACR75 to have that nice soft bounce we're looking for. And this thing still costs $89. And remember the Demon Princess switch with the RGB lens? Check this out. Yup, this is some crazy RGB for sure. Alright, here's a final look at the NEZUKO themed ACR75 modded and upgraded by yours truly. I think it turned out pretty amazing in both look and in feel, and you can complete the look with a nice pink coiled cable. Speaking of coiled cables, a quick word from our sponsor, CableMod. You build a gangster keyboard like this NEZUKO ACR75 and you want to complete the look. There is nothing better than a nice matching coiled USB cable to go with the setup, right? So the guys at CableMod is here to help. In addition to their original custom cable making service, CableMod has recently launched pre-made coiled USB cables in various colors and styles for immediate purchase on Amazon. Every CableMod cable is made with high quality inner ModFlex sleeving and strong yet flexible outer mod mesh layer for beautiful looks as well as longevity. Unlike the typical DIY custom USB cables that uses heat shrink tubing, CableMod uses metal USB connector housings for reliable operation, so you don't have to end up ripping the connectors off your cable. You can also opt for the Pro coiled version with the crowd favorite Aviator quick disconnect that is powder coated, or you can also go with the classic with just a nice coil and USB connections at the ends. Regardless of the build, CableMod offers 14 different colors to complete your look, and the classic goes for about $39.90 while the Pro goes for $49.90 on Amazon with Prime shipping. Links in the description below. Alright, we talked about looks, we talked about the flex. Now, what about the sound? Let's check it out. So, what is my final thought? You know, for $89, this is a pretty good entry board with very easy assembly that many people can get into the hobby with. In stock form, this thing sounds pretty good, and with no discernible flaws like pinging or hollowness whatsoever. As indicated before, its major weakness is the case room or the lack thereof, and hence the lack of flex for a gasket board. But with some mods, as you could see, you can really push the envelope to what an $89 entry board can really achieve. At the end of the day, I feel like if you want a nice, Thocky, easy to live with, and potentially very comfortable to type on keyboard, the ACR75 or any of the ACR boards will be a great option for you. One funny thing about my little silicone layer mod was that it created this diffusion layer that helps to accent the side LEDs as well. So talk about a desired side effect. If you're still here, thank you for watching till the end.
Dude, this wig is absolutely terrible. I look like Steve Aoki or something, and it's like all over my face.